Hi, my name is Douglas Vogt from the Dihole Foundation, and this is Series 4, Part 5C, the easy way of surviving this polar reversal cataclysm ice age. And unfortunately, it's the most coded secret that's in the Torah. No greater coded secret than this. And that's probably why no one ever figured it out before yours truly came around, because you have to come in through the science side of it to understand what the Torah really is, what's really going on, why Abraham bought the cave to begin with. There's too much to learn or know to figure this thing out. I'm going to have a special note for those who are atheists, because I get comments from atheists the minute they see the word God. It's a three-letter word that must be the equivalent of them running fingernails across a blackboard. If you've seen my earlier videos, certainly video series 1, you know, the way I conceive God is really the operating system of this dihole that we're in. If I've done anything good, I think I've proven that we're in a synchronous system. That's why all these blank periods in space, why the polar reversals happen roughly every 12,000 years, because we're in a synchronous system. And every synchronous system has to have an operating system. So if you see the word God mentioned, in your head, translate it to operating system. That you can relate to. And you have to break out of what you were taught and why you think you don't like the idea of a God. Just follow along and try to open up your mind, and don't be stubborn about this. Anyway, the information I'm going to present came from a number of my books and research. In God's Judgement book, by the way, it's at the printers now, and it should be available from Amazon or from Vector Associates probably by third week of May. This is the 4th of May, 2019. So give it about 3 weeks, and it should be in Amazon to order it again. Also, from chapters 4 on the Hebrew alphabet, 6 and 7. The mythologies have some of the clues or evidence of our ancestors basically screaming from their graves of what happened to them. It's in chapters 10 and 11. I have some of the ASCII texts on vectorpub.com. You could read it. Or you can get a CD of a PDF of the whole book with the pictures for $10 plus $3 for shipping. If you're overseas, include $5. You could send it to through PayPal. Anyway, that's 2 of the books. This is the key book. Once you figure out that this alphabet is exactly what Moses says, he says, this was the writing of God and the words of God. In other words, he didn't design the letters, and he didn't put the sequence of symbols on the tablets. So once you understand this thing is the product of highly advanced previous civilization, it opens up all new possibilities of really what's really going on. But you have to remember, this is really what's going on. You have an extremely advanced civilization. Either they were 5th-dimensional beings or 6th-dimensional beings that created this thing. That's why the book is indexed by the Library of Congress, Quantum Computing. Not kidding. Moses, some people think that the only thing that were on those 2 tablets he brought down, one, they weren't stone. I covered that earlier. There's no way it could be. He couldn't carry 90 pounds on his back, trust me on this. Was only the letters that made up the 10 Commandments. Not true. There's 304,805 symbols or letters in the Torah. You duplicate it twice because, one, there was supposedly 2 sets of tablets brought in, but also many of the stories of the codes are mentioned twice. So you double it, 609,610. On the other side, the number of Hebrews, male Hebrews who left Egypt, 603,550. That's a composite number. I'll cover that in a second. Total chapters and verses in the Torah, 6,034. That's half the number, 12,068. and the letters that make up the titles of the 5 titles. 26, the grand total, 609,610. In short, it's a hash total. Every accountant out there should know this is a hash total. This number is made up of 50 times 12,068, gives you 603,400. What's the 150 left over? It took me a few months to figure it out. It discovered another code system Moses used, which is cumulative small numbering. The unspoken name of God is Yod He Vav He. So the small numbering value of those 5 letters times each other gives you 150. So basically he was saying here with this number, God's cycles. In order to figure any of this stuff out, I had to know Moses' 10 code systems, the basic code systems. The first 3 or 4 were known by the rabbis, maybe currently today. The rest of them, forget it. Either been lost or they never knew it at all. Basic theory of existence is what you also have to know. You can't figure out this other way, the simple way of surviving this cataclysm, the one that this highly advanced civilization used, unless you know this theory of multidimensional reality. I haven't done the videos yet of volumes 1, 2, and 3. Some of you say, well, it's something called historical relativism, which says there was no Moses, there was no Abraham, there was no Exodus, etc. There was no Joseph. And it's because this came about 19th century in Germany, historical relativism. I think it's because they couldn't figure it out, or they couldn't find the real Mount Sinai, therefore it can't exist. So if you get a chance to get a copy of Volume 3, you'll see the whole expedition. It's over 250 pages of the book and lots of pictures of the 3 expeditions I did, 2 to the central Sinai and the other one where the crossing was. And you'll see all the altars, every single one that Moses mentions in Exodus and Numbers. He gives an excellent description and accurate of the route he went to get to Mount Sinai. That's all covered in there, including exactly which days they were and how long it took them to get there. The total exodus was from Goshen to the base of Mount Sinai was about 60 days. The other one, this book here, which is really the next series of videos I'll be doing, tells you why Abraham bought the cave. And it wasn't in Hebron, never was. It's towards the base of Mount Sinai. And all the clues and codes tell you that too, all from Moses. He's the one who gives you all the clues. For those who don't believe in any kind of religion, look at this as a scientific mystery, a mystery story. Now you got to figure out the mystery about the clues left by primitive man. Look at it like that. Maybe that's easier for you to swallow. Anyway, you'll find out in this book, Abraham was not 100 years old when he had his son. His wife was certainly not 90 years old and gave birth. Didn't happen. But in the first temple period, the priests changed some of the stuff, the word breaks, and really she was probably in her teens and he was in his early 20s. And you'll see exactly what it is. It's explained in here quite easily. You see it right off the bat. Anyway, there's three main secrets to this thing you can't explain. Number one was the Hebrew alphabet. There's no question it's 22 views of that waveform, a modified square wave in a shape of a toroid. The second one, you can't explain that unless you realize we're dealing with something other than primitive man. Somebody extremely highly advanced came up with these shapes, what they were doing. The second one is the exact number of years between the geomagnetic reversals, aka polar reversals, and cataclysm. How could a late Bronze Age man know this 12,068 year cycle? Because the number's embedded in the Torah, as I showed you in Moses' 10 code systems and the videos. There's no way he could. I mean, I found it only because 12 astronomers figured out the distance between the Earth and 12 open clusters and globular clusters from us, and that revealed the 6 blank periods of space. But it took astronomers and the invention of telescopes and everything else that went along with it, including the redshift. So he couldn't have known it. There's no way dear sweet Moses could have possibly known this. Oh, by the way, Moses did exist. Volume 3 on the Exodus shows all the altars he had created. Fictional people do not leave physical evidence behind. The third phenomenon you cannot get around is the exact date for the next Gleisberg cycle is embedded in the Torah. The genealogy is from Adam to Abraham, when they had their first son, except Adam, it's really his third son, totals 2046. That is when, between September and December 2046, is the next Gleisberg cycle. And I showed the Torah in video series 7, God's 11th cycle, that Moses didn't even know about. He gives us the exact month, the day, and the year for the next polar reversal and cataclysm. Okay, I'm going to start off with this. This is from Plato's Statesman. And it's an example of that our ancestors did know that there were these cycles that ran through time and the Earth's rotation changed and went the other way. So I'm going to read it. There was a time when God directed the revolutions of the world, but at the completion of a certain cycle, he let go, and the world, by a necessity of its nature, turned back. In other words, the reversal, and went around the other way. But the truth is that there are 2 cycles of the world, and in one of them it is governed by the immediate province and receives life and immortality, and in the other it lets go again and has a reverse action during infinite ages, 12,068 years. This new action is spontaneous and is due to the exquisite perfection of balance, to the vast size of the universe and the smallness of the pivot upon which it turns. I estimate it's between 7 and 8 hours. All changes in heaven affect the effects, the animal world, and this being the greatest of them is most destructive to man and animals. At the beginning of the cycle, before our own, very few of them had survived, and on these a mighty change passed. Volume 3 of Oxford's University Dialogues of Plato, or you can go to Loeb's Classics. The method hinted at in the Torah is, like I mentioned, there is the deepest coded secret there is. That's why no one ever figured it out. And you have to think in terms of a society that is tens of millions of years more advanced than us. They knew the program that is in our die hole perfectly, and they were able to do it. They must have been either highly advanced 5th dimensional beings or maybe 6th. I don't even know if the 6th dimensional beings even have a society or they'd even bother with one. I'm not too sure. You have to think in terms of an information theory of existence. Hence, you have to know that theory of existence. This is the reason why no one before ever figured it out. Anyway, first 2 questions that you have to ask. Did Moses exist, and was there an Exodus? I kind of mentioned that already. Volume 3 covers that. If you go into Die Hole Foundations, you'll see actually the 2 expeditions and the 3rd one, the two the real Mount Sinai, and some of the altars are on there. The whole story is obviously in the book. The next question is, how did Moses get this information? Now, the rabbis, unfortunately, they make everything sound like it's a miracle because they can't figure it out themselves. It's not their fault. It's just the way they were taught. This is not a miracle. Don't think in terms of magic and miracles. This is technology, highly advanced technology. You just don't know how it works. How did Moses communicate with God? Two ways. One was the rod, because the ark hadn't been made. The ark part here is courtesy of Raiders of the Lost Ark. We all love that movie. Courtesy and theory. Thank you, Steven Spielberg. The top part is a collection of what I think was on the top. It's different from what I've seen other ideas of the Ark of the Covenant. The two cherubims by the legends is two young baby boys. What was interesting about them is it said in the legends that their heads were tilted back and the closest thing to each other were their lips, and they were looking down at something in the center of the ark. Now, you know, if you watched my videos 6 on the code systems, the length of the sacred cubit is 24.136 inches. So this thing was 5 feet long. We know the hand breadth is about 6 inches. And with 5 things on top of this ark that the Hebrews did not make, they pulled it out of the cave. One was something that resembled like a chair, but it's not a chair. It was blue crystalline, and it basically must have been the computer and a power source. The other thing were 4 round discs. It's described by Ezekiel in the book Ezekiel. The book Ezekiel was written by Baruch, the grandson of Jeremiah. That's explained in volume 4, The Prophets and the Priests. It's also explained in the back of God's Judgement book, who he was. But one on each side of each one of the cherubs. And I remember there's a bunch of eyes around it. Well, it wasn't really eyes, it was like a bunch of LEDs, and this crystal was grown in a way that the image was thrown above it. The tabernacle was basically 30 feet by 60 feet, at about 20 feet high. And it instructed Moses to have the smoke in the room from here up to the top. So you had the way this thing worked, I'm going to show a lightning here, is because what he describes here is a perfectly described what they call a flame speaker or plasma speaker. This is a German company made one like this, and there's others. You can go online and see how they work. But it was discovered by Faraday in the late 1800s that if you modulated a high voltage frequency across ionized particles, you get perfect sound. So this tabernacle, when this thing was turned on, you had a speaker that was 30 feet by 60 feet and about 10 feet deep of smoke, and all those molecules vibrated, and one very loud speaker system. That's why it says the Hebrews didn't want to be in the presence and basically ran for their lives. It was too loud. I don't know how Moses did it. Maybe he was half deaf anyway. But that's how this thing worked. It was a flame speaker. How late Bronze Age mans could not have figured out how to build this thing or what it was. But they did. The key of the whole thing was this thing right here. Now, no description. The description of this thing shows up occasionally in some of the prophet section where they say he was enthroned, the throne on top, things like that. They hint at it, but they aren't direct about it. The only one who was direct about it was Baruch, because he's the guy who put this thing away back in the family burial cave. That's how he knew, and he knew it was safe to describe it. Before, never described. Okay, so they built the tabernacle after 1 year of being at Mount Sinai. They set the thing up, and Moses is in this tabernacle, basically taking dictation. And this is the quote from here in Numbers chapters 12:7. My servant Moses is not so. He was referring to anybody else. He is trusted in all my house. With him do I speak mouth to mouth, even manifestly, and not in dark speeches, and similitude of the Lord doth he behold. In other words, had a running conversation in Hebrew, whatever language they were speaking at the time. I assume it was Hebrew. And Moses asked questions, and he got answers back. And not coded stuff, not things we get in our dreams where you need a psychiatrist to figure out what the hell you just dreamt. No, That's what he did. So the stuff that's quoted in here is because of this mechanism. You have to look at it as a mechanism. It's not magic. The Hebrews journeyed from where Mount Sinai was, which is on the desert, and I'm not going to show where it is. He was living with, at 20 years old, it says in the Torah, you're a man. Now, why did they give 20 years old? We know Moses murdered an Egyptian boy, probably somebody close to his own age. And I explained that he was living in the compound of people who were basically relatives of the Pharaoh's family. That's why he was raised in the household of the Pharaoh. There's a reason why. So he murdered him, but he was the second son. The oldest was Aaron. Aaron was going to be the high priest of Hathor. So the father instructed Moses to kill this Egyptian because he must have found out where the family put the gold and the silver. So he escaped and went to Midian, which is here around Elat on both sides. So he used to travel from here, going north, with his sheep, arrive at the base of the hill roughly in the middle of February, because the lambs are born March and a little bit in April, generally, in the northern hemisphere. And that's what his truck was for 60 years. So he became a man, but he left at 20 because he was on his own, therefore you're a man, and an adult. And he went there, and then that's what happened. For 60 years, he knew the Sinai desert, like better than the back of his hand. So he leaves us 10 major clues in the Torah of what this is all about, of what this great secret is of how to save your butt. So he knew, now keep in mind, he knew the Sinai better than anybody else. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, so the first clue, Exodus 23:20. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee by the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Have light bulbs gone over in your head yet? It should. Take heed of him and hearken unto his voice. Be not rebellious against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. Well, the unspoken name of God is Yod He Vav He. I've interpreted the Yod as an abbreviation for God. He Vav He I interpret as meaning builder. So it would be God the builder. What does he build? He builds the universe because he's the operating system. Next quote, Exodus 32:34. And now go, lead the people into the place of which I have spoken unto thee. Behold, mine angel shall go before thee. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them. Moses knew like I mentioned, knew the Sinai at the back of his hand. What does he need anybody to lead him anywhere? Which I have prepared. He's going to a place that Moses doesn't know about. He doesn't know where this place is. A place of which I spoken unto thee. See, look at this thing as a science mystery novel. Got it? Second clue. The Hebrews left Mount Sinai on the 50th day of the second year. That's lunar year. They traveled for 3 days into the wilderness of Paran, which is towards the south. And that's the quote, Numbers 10:11. One of the code systems, you have to take a longer word and take it apart. Paran, that's what it's spelled in Hebrew. The first part of the word means mouth or opening. The second part of the word is rejoicing or song of joy. Together the two words means joyful opening. Gee, that's a real funny name for an area of the desert, don't you think? Third clue. Hebrews arrive at the place 3 days later, they walk there. And on the first day, a fire started in the uppermost part of the camp in Numbers 11:1. Moses calls the place Taberah. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. The word is made up of two other words. The first part of the word, Teb, if you swap the bet, the B, for the adjacent letter A, that's one of the code systems, swapping adjacent letters, you get the word which means room or chamber. The second word, Yarah, means to uncover. The two words together, this word, really means to uncover a room or chamber. Now you know why he needed, God sent an angel, whatever that may be, to lead the congregation to a place 3 days south, to a room or a chamber. Getting curious now? After the first day, the Hebrews started to complain about wanting to eat meat. Don't we all like that? Six strange things happen that cannot be explained in our normal time and space. They're, in essence, clues to realize, okay, something's different here. They've done something. They may have gone into a room or a chamber or something, and all of a sudden, really weird stuff are happening. First one. Next day, a wind brought a huge number of quails inland. They supposedly dropped dead a day's journey, about 4 to 5 miles on north and south of where the encampment was. By the way, I know within a couple hundred yards where this place was, where they went. The pile of dead birds were said to be 2 cubits, which should be 4.2 feet high. That's impossible. I saw so few birds anyway in the Sinai desert. For this to happen, it's just impossible. As meat was still in their mouth, the people started dying from a very fast plague. Nobody dies from food poisoning that fast. That can't be in normal time and space. Aaron and his sister Miriam decided that God also spoke to them. God didn't like that one bit. The end result was Miriam wound up getting an instant case of leprosy. Nobody gets leprosy that fast. Korah and 250 other princes of the other tribes assembled themselves against Moses and Aaron. Now, the key word is against them. There's a reason why, and I'll explain that shortly. God again became angry. The earth opened up and swallowed them up, including all of their tents, belongings, and families. That's called really pissed off. A fire came down from the sky and killed about 250 who offered incense in front of the tent of meeting. The ground instantly opened up. Again, can't happen. Let me go explain this 250. 250 times the length of the sacred cubit gives you 6,034 of the chapters and verses in the Torah. So it's something about the Torah. 250 here, same message as really the Torah. This thing couldn't have happened in real time and space. We're not done with the 250. The next day, the congregation again came to the entrance of the tent of meeting and challenged Moses because 250 of their leaders had been killed the previous day. A plague had already started by the time Aaron went out among the people. Scripture reports that 14,700 people had died that fast. This is a coded number. Nobody died. It's the total number of days in 40 years plus 90 days. Where they get the 90 days from? The 60 days it took them to go from Goshen to the base of Mount Sinai. And the 30 days, supposedly they went into this room. Oh, let me go back to this. So I'm going to explain why the congregation went after Moses and Aaron, why they went after him. This is why. When Moses went back into the cave to supposedly retrieve another set of tablets, Korah must have followed him, or one of his relatives went and followed him into the cave system. In the second cave, they must have seen the burlap bags or food bags, the grain sacks, loaded with the gold and silver that Joseph collected for the sale of the grain. But the family, the Ephraimites, never gave up the gold and silver. So 11 of the 12 tribes went to slavery, but not Joseph's two sons, or him, because he was freed by his girlfriend, Hitchetzu. So 11 of the 12 tribes went to slavery, only 10 came out. One disappeared. So they must have then figured out the secret. And that's why they rebelled against Moses and Aaron, because they knew what they were. They knew Aaron was an Ephraimite. You'll learn all this in volumes 2 on Joseph and 3 on the Exodus. I cover it. The actual family tree of Aaron and Joseph. Fifth clue. Your carcass shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, those are all the adults over 20, from 20 years old and upward, that have murmured against me. But as for you, your carcasses, now those, the younger ones, under 20, at the time of the Exodus, shall fall in the wilderness, as your children shall be wanderers in the wilderness for 40 years, and shall bear your stayings until your carcasses be consumed in the wilderness. Loves the word carcass. Why does it just say dead? No. Again, you have to take the word for carcass apart. Jason letter swapping again. So, first part of the word for carcass is gane, which means body, corpse, or dead body. And that kind of fits a carcass. But the second part of the word, that's different. Second part of the word, yahom, is not a word, but if you swap the mim, the M, for the lamed, the L, you get the word yahol, which means to prevail or overcome. The new meaning of the word is then to overcome death. He's done this more than once, where the surface meaning of a word is opposite of when you take the word apart. This is not the first time he's done this. So carcass here, he's really trying to say overcome death. Now you'll see what this means in a few moments. So the surface story, everybody who left that's over 20 years old, all been dead by the end of 40 years. Okay, first, the rest of these clues all came from Deuteronomy. Now, historical relativism says that Jeremiah is the one who wrote the Deuteronomy, and the Torah was written over 700 years. Because some words that were translated in Deuteronomy are the only words that were not at the time of Moses, but only at the time of Jeremiah, the end of the temple period. And they're right about that. What they don't know, because they're very lazy or just lazy scholars and didn't do what I had to do, it took me 11 months to figure out these priests had 3 names. They had a given name at birth and when they were scribes. When they entered the priesthood, roughly around 20 years old, they adopted a priestly name, which is usually a composite name. And if they were the eldest son and their father was the high priest, and they were going to become the high priest, they adopted a prophet's name. So they had 3 names. 2 of the priests actually had doubled. They doubled it because they were concealing their identity. But that's another story. So this is how you figure out what really happened, and not what they teach you, because that's wrong. 2 Kings chapter 22:8, and Hilkiah, the high priest, said unto Shaphan. Shaphan is Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah's grandfather. Said to Shaphan the scribe, he's less than 20 years old, I have found the book of the law. The law is without question the Torah. In the house of the Lord, the temple, which was closed, and they just opened it up after a bad king. And Hilkiah delivered the book to Shaphan, and he read it. Chapter 22:10. And Shaphan the scribe told the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest hath delivered me a book. And Shaphan read it before the king. The same story is retold in 2 Chronicles 34, 14 to 21, except it gives us additional information about the book. In verse 14, it tells us that the book was given by Moses. Therefore, there's no question it's Deuteronomy. And in verse 19, it tells us the king Joash rent his clothing. He tore his clothing up. He was that really kind of upset. Shaphan read it to him. Why the rabbis and the others couldn't figure this out, you have to ask them. But I'll tell you one thing. It took me 11 months to figure out the whole family history and what was going on, thanks to Excel. Thank you, Bill Gates and Microsoft, for that. Okay, so Deuteronomy starts off supposedly at the end of the 40 years, and supposedly then all the people that were over 20 that saw the Exodus, was in Egypt to see all these miracles, were all supposed to be dead now, right? You're going to find out just the opposite. You'll see the pattern that Moses sets up here in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 1:30. The Lord your God who hath gone before you, he shall fight for you according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness where thou hast seen how that the Lord thy God bore thee. Is he talking first person to those who had survived and seen this thing, the adults? Second one, did ever a people hear the voice of God speaking out of the midst of the fire? That was at Mount Sinai, where only the adults were in the cave to see this. Thou hast heard and lived. The Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes. Again, talking only to the adults. Hey, I thought they were all dead. 5:4. The Lord spoke with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. And the Lord showed signs and wonders great and sore upon Egypt, upon Pharaoh, and upon all his house before your eyes. You got it? Deuteronomy 7:15. And the Lord will take away from thee all the sickness, and he will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which thou knows, upon thee. Next one. The great trials which thine eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders, and the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm, holding the rod, thereby the Lord thy God brought thee out. Chapters 9:17. And I took hold of the two tablets and cast them out of my two hands and broke them before your eyes. He didn't break them. I explained that earlier. There's probably a translation issue with the people who did the translation of the Bible. He only dropped them out of his hands. That's all he did. He wouldn't have broken them. He couldn't have broken them. Thy God hath done for thee great and tremendous things which thine eyes have seen. Next one. And thou know ye this day, for I speak not with your children that have not known, and that have not seen the chastisement of the Lord your God. But your eyes have seen all the great work of the Lord which he did. Specifically, Moses is saying, it's not your kids, it's you. But all these people are supposed to have been dead. Carcasses, wilderness. Guess not. This is the last one for this. And Moses called unto all Israel and said unto them, Ye have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, unto Pharaoh, unto all his servants, and unto all the land, the great trials of which thine eyes saw, and the signs of those great wonders. Ye are standing this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your heads, your tribes, your elders, and your officers, even all the men of Israel. 250 supposedly died, all their leadership of all the tribes. They didn't die at all, did they? Well, their leadership is all there intact. Sixth clue. There's 10. Bear with me. Deuteronomy 2:14. And the days of which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over to the brook of Zered were were 30 and 8 years until all the generations, even the men of war, were consumed. Okay. I've been through a good chunk of the Sinai. B'nai Kadesh, there's several Kadeshes mentioned in the Torah. It just means holy Kadesh. Kadesh B'nai is a well here. This is El Qasima. It's a small town police station there. There's the well. This is what it looks like today. The well is actually there. There is no evidence anywhere in the Sinai of large, tens of thousands of people living in the Sinai desert. The Egyptian guards I went with, they know of none. We didn't see any. No mass graves, no garbage piles. We all make garbage. They leave evidence behind. And other things, we don't see it. Seventh clue. Thy remnant clothing waxed not old upon thee, neither did thy foot swell these 40 years. Deuteronomy 29:4. And I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes are not waxed old upon you, and thy shoe is not waxed old upon thy foot. This is an example of the ground in the Sinai desert. Rock, flint chips, calcium carbonate of all types. There's a close-up of the ground. This is the flint, and this is the calcium, limestone. Chips of pretty hard to walk on. The whole desert's like this. The first expedition I went on, the Egyptian guide I had to give him a second pair of boots I had because his boots fell apart. Your shoes wouldn't last 6 months tops in the desert, more or less the shoes they were wearing, probably just leather coverings. No way are going to last 40 years. No way are their clothing, anybody's clothing is going to last 40 years anywhere. In the desert, the ultraviolet light, the heat, the sweat, they probably had cotton clothing, fell apart. No way. There's absolutely no way. That is impossible. But it's a clue. Eighth clue relates to the angel who led Moses and the congregation through the Sinai desert for 40 years. Deuteronomy. And Moses called unto all Israel and said unto them, that's all the tribes means, ye have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt unto Pharaoh. But the Lord hath not given you a heart to know, and eyes to see, and ears to hear unto this day. The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but the things that are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of his law. He's overtly telling you there's hidden things that these primitive people couldn't possibly have known what they saw, what they heard, even what they did. Clearly saying there are secret things in this book that you're not going to understand because technologically you're too primitive. Today, we're still pretty primitive, but at least one of us figured out what the technology is, what they're really talking about here. That's the eighth clue. Ninth, we're almost done. Deuteronomy 30, this chapter starts off by saying that all of the beings, blessings and curses have passed, implying this is the end of days. Okay, Deuteronomy 30 talks about the Hebrews scattered all over the whole world and are to return. Okay, the next part, the next verse is not them. So you got to understand, it's different. 30 verse 4. If any of thine that are dispersed be in the uppermost parts of heaven, from hence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee, and the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed. By my theory of existence, we're fourth dimensional beings. We're in a created reality. created by a dihold, a synchronous system. So you have a synchronous system, a dihold, and you got a creation. This thing's saying there's multiple parts to this, to the storage, to the RAM storage, to the makeup of this dihold. Multiple parts in it that are accessible. Hence, the previous one that says, secrets only that God understands. That's what he's talking about. The 10th clue is about the word the neither world, sometimes interpreted as hell, something like that, in Deuteronomy 32:22. Moses used it as really to mean consumed to the lower earth by God, which means you can interpret it as going into a cave or an opening. 11th clue is really from Ezekiel. Ezekiel, again, is Baruch. He's the guy who put the ark away. Those who say they know where the ark is, they say in all kinds of crazy places. If you can't figure out who the person was who put the ark away, you will not ever figure out where the ark is. Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. I'll stop there. The current crop of Jews, including yours truly, well, I actually know because 3/10 of my DNA is Egyptian. But most Jews don't know what tribe they were part of. They have no idea. Too many years of it. 2,600 years since the fall of the first temple. I mean, just forget it. They don't know. In fact, some of the Arabs in the West Bank may have better claim to being from one of those tribes than some Jews from Germany, Poland, etc., or Russia. Okay, so it says, Behold, they say, our bones are dried up and our hope is lost. We are clean cut off. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of the graves, O my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. Most people interpret this as saying the dead are going to rise. Not going to happen. When you're dead, you're dead. He's talking about something else. The beginning part of this was his dried bones. He describes a desert. No question, a dry desert. That's where he is. That's the Sinai desert. The secret of redemption. Now I'll explain it. One, you have to realize we're dealing with an extremely highly advanced technology and people that make us look like monkeys. They're that advanced. They understood and knew exactly how the universe worked. They knew exactly the program that creates our reality. They knew the program that they were in. And they were able to build things like that crystalline computer on top of that ark, that rod, and other things. So, what happened? How come their clothing didn't wear out and their shoes didn't wear out if it was 40 years? This is the secret. The Hebrews were in a room or chamber, yeah, right, for either 30 days or 31 days. I haven't made my mind up whether they went immediately in after they arrived at the place or they waited one day before they went in. It's the only reason. But on the outside, 40 years had passed. That's a ratio of 471 to 1 or 487 to 1. For one or the other, if you're in this buffer, I'll give you an analogy of what this is about. In a computer, our computers. Let's say you're in Microsoft Word and you also have Photoshop. You have a picture you want to put in a Word and you have some text you want to put in a Word. You'll highlight the text, hit Control-C. That block of words, ASCII text, will go into a block of RAM memory in the computer. Same thing goes for a picture. All those bits that make up that TIFF or JPEG go into RAM memory. Now, time doesn't have to change at all there. It just stays there. In this system, there is a time, but it runs much, much slower and at a different rate, so it doesn't use resources that the system needs to create this reality. Back to this. So this ratio of 471 to 487, it's either, if you're in this buffer for 150 days, it's equivalent of either 193 years or 200 years, which means you would have passed the worst part of the nova and the ice age. That's what this highly advanced civilization did to escape this event, why they survived it. Now, why the operating system is telling Moses this and leaving all these clues is maybe he wants us to survive this thing. But it's under his terms, not under ours, obviously. This thing's too well coded. I don't know if anyone of you are going to believe me or what, because most of you can't think in terms of an extremely highly advanced technology and people. We've been playing with computers, what, like 60 or 70 years? These people have been doing it for tens of millions of years. What do you think they figured out? I want to give some people some hope so you understand what the game that's being played here. Baruch, he wrote Joel, he wrote Obadiah, and much of Psalms, but not all of Psalms. Some of the Psalms are written in the 1st or 2nd century. And it shall come to pass that whoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered, for in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those that escape, as the Lord has said, among the remnant, those whom the Lord shall call. I want to give people hope. God's term is this. He doesn't want us praying to man-made gods. It says clearly, it's in God's Judgment book, and I don't want to step on too many people's toes or make too many people unhappy or feel protective. But anything you see in this dimension, whether it be a figure of a man, a woman, animals, plants, trees, they're not God. God is unique. He is the operating system that creates this reality we're in. For some reason, he decided to talk to late Bronze Age people, and that's it. There's a question of free will, how we perceive time, some of the stuff I cover in God's Judgment book, which hopefully will be available in about 3 weeks. Recording date today is May 4th, I think. So in about 3 weeks, the book should be back in Amazon. But this is what's trying to be done. In one of the mythologies from, I think it was Central America or South America, it was South America, I think by Venezuela, it said, all of man's false gods pass away. And now you understand. You're faced with the truth of what reality is, not what you'd like it to be. If you're a representative of the United States federal government and you want to talk to me about what I've discovered, what I have here on these videos, you know how to get a hold of me. You did 42 or 40 some odd years ago, and I think you have more currently too. We can make a meeting at the FBI office here in Jacksonville. They're on Gate Parkway. We can make a meeting there. The reason I have a meeting there is I don't want cranks and stuff like that, and I don't want foreign agents. You can't get into that building unless you are who you say you are. I think we have something to talk about, don't you? Dihel Foundation is a 501c3. Science Foundation, you understand perfectly what we do and what we're trying to do. We studied the causes of the Ice Age and polar reversals. You can contact me through research at Dihel Foundation. You can donate through that same thing through PayPal if you wish. It would be appreciated. I would like to hire some geologists to help out in the research. I hope you got something out of this. You'll probably have to watch this more than once to get all of it out. As usual, I cover too much information.